Hi, and thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to teach you the 4 different types of techniques that you can use to start taking your pulse or doing the Nadi Vigyan. So the first thing I want to talk about is you're going to use your 3 fingers to read the pulse. This finger, your pointer finger, is going to be your Vata finger. It's where you're going to feel for your Vata dosha. The second finger, your middle finger, is going to be your Pitta dosha, and you'll feel the qualities of the Pitta dosha underneath this finger. And your third finger, your ring finger, is going to be your Kapha finger, so that's where you'll feel all the Kapha dosha qualities or gunas. Now, what you're going to do is learn to take your pulse by looking for the bony prominence underneath your thumb, and it's going to be on your radial artery. And if you are feminine presenting, you're going to want to take the pulse on your left wrist. If you're masculine presenting, you're going to want to take the pulse on your right wrist. And if you are non-binary, you're going to want to do whatever feels most comfortable for you or for your client. And if you can't pick one, I would just invite you to maybe do the sex that was assigned at birth. But like I said, it is whatever is most comfortable for your client, for your non-binary clients. So since I am feminine presenting, I'm going to take my pulse on the left wrist. Now we're going to start with the surface pulse. So remember, it's right here underneath that bony prominence. And when you put your fingers on your skin, you're going to want to push down just ever so lightly, as in it's going to be what is considered the upper third, and that will make more sense as I explain more of the pulse techniques. But just remember that the surface pulse is in that upper third portion. It's just slightly underneath your fingers. So you're going to want to innocently read your pulse here. Don't try to make qualities happen. Just let them naturally flow to you. And we're going to go ahead and take 2 minutes to read our pulse right now. So you can go ahead and pause this video. And remember, like I said, when you're reading your pulse, make sure that you're doing it ever so innocently. You're not over analyzing it, and you're going to want to observe the gunas or the qualities of the pulse. So go ahead and pause this video and take your surface pulse. So what qualities did you feel? I'll go ahead and tell you some of my qualities. So under my Vata finger, which remembers that pointer index finger, I definitely felt some snake-like qualities. It was very cool, light, and a subtle pulse, which is also very indicative of Vata-like qualities. It didn't feel like it was crazy amounts of Vata or little amounts of Vata. It actually felt pretty balanced and pretty Vata-like, so that's a good thing because I've been really working on getting my Vata back into balance. Underneath my Pitta finger, I felt some jumping, and I felt it more prominent and almost like a sharp sensation, like if you can imagine like blood, like, you know, squirting out. I know that's kind of weird, but that's what it felt like, okay? So it felt very Pitta-like underneath my finger, which is also good. And it didn't feel like over strong, but it definitely was stronger sensation than the Vata finger. And then I actually was able to feel some movement underneath my Kapha finger today, which is wonderful because if you follow my journey, you'll know that my Kapha finger, I tend to not feel Kapha very well, and I could actually feel it today. It was light and it was cool, but it was there. So that makes me really happy because that shows that what I'm doing is helping to actually bring this into balance. So the next style of pulse, the technique I'm going to teach you, is the deep pulse. So with the deep pulse, we're going to go ahead and go back to the same spot on our wrist, on that radial artery, and we're going to, it's called the deep third. So remember, the surface pulse was the upper third. Now the deep pulse is that deep third. So it's like you have 3 layers, right? So the surface pulse is up here, the deep pulse is way down here as far as like the pressure for your fingers, right? So that's what you want to think about. Now, with the deep pulse, what you're going to do is you're going to push, and apply a lot of pressure until you cannot feel the pulse anymore on that radial artery, and then go ahead and release ever so slightly and see which dosha Vata, Pitta, or Kapha is the most prominent. So right now with mine, Vata is the most prominent. It pops up right away. It's like boom, 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 Vata. And I'm very Vata-like, and I do have a lot of Vata qualities, and I've had to do a lot of bringing the Vata down. So that doesn't surprise me that for my deep pulse, the Vata is the most prominent one for me. So the next technique of pulse that I'm going to teach you is the Subdosha pulse technique. So this pulse is just beneath that surface pulse, and it's before the Dhatu pulse, which I'll explain that next. But remember how we have those thirds? We have the upper third, which is the surface pulse. Then you're going to have the middle third, which is the Dhatu pulse, which I'll teach you next. And then you'll have the lowest level of the third, which is that deep pulse. So when you're doing the Subdosha pulse, you're going to go right in between the middle and the upper. So it's like right in the middle there, okay? And make sure when you're taking your pulse to have the pads of your fingers down on top of your wrist like this. You don't want to bend them up or down for the Subdosha pulse. You want them right on flat, flush to that radial artery. So with this one, you just go ahead and push down a little bit more than the Subdosha pulse. And like I said, a little bit less than the Dhatu pulse, which I'll teach you next. And so I'll teach you now what each finger means. So with the first finger, you're going to divide it up into 4 parts. Actually, each finger, you're going to divide it up into 4 parts, but we're going to talk about the first finger, the Vata finger. So the first fourth right here, closest to your thumb, is going to be the Prana Vata Subdosha. The second fourth is going to be the Udana Vata Subdosha. The third fourth of your finger is going to be the Samana Vata Subdosha, and the fourth of your finger is the Apana Vata Subdosha. And the fifth, which is Vyana Subdosha, is like in the center and like all of it. So you divide your finger up into 4, and then the fifth Subdosha is like in the center, okay? So the same goes for the Pitta and the Kapha. So with the Pitta finger, I'll put up all my fingers so I don't give you just the middle Pitta finger. But the first fourth is the Pachaka Pitta Subdosha. The second fourth is the Ranjaka Pitta Subdosha. The third fourth is the Sadaka Pitta Subdosha. And the fourth is the Alochaka Pitta Subdosha. And the fifth is the Brajaka Pitta Subdosha in that center. Now for the Kapha finger, I'll go ahead and put that rest down because it's okay now. The first fourth is the Kledaka Kapha. The second fourth is the Avalambaka Kapha Subdosha. The third fourth is the Bodhaka Kapha Subdosha. And the fourth is the Tarpaka Kapha Subdosha. And the fifth is the Shleshaka Kapha Subdosha. So with each one of your fingers now, it turns into 5 other little receptors. So you have your just main receptors for your surface pulse, and then you go deeper, just a little bit into the Subdosha, and then you get 5 extra receptors per fingers. It's pretty fascinating, and it can teach us so much about the body. The final pulse technique that I'm going to teach you about is the Dhatu pulse technique. And this is that middle third. So remember, with the surface, we had the top third as far as the amount of pressure. Then just slightly underneath that is the Subdosha. Then underneath that in the middle third now is the Dhatu pulse. And then underneath that even is the deep pulse. So we're going to go right in the middle is going to be the Dhatu pulse. Now for the other pulse techniques, we've been on the pads of our fingers. Now we're going to roll up on the very tippy tops of our fingers for the Dhatu pulse. So it'll look like this instead of like this. So this is what it looked like for the other 3. Now this is what it'll look like for the Dhatu pulse. Still in that exact same spot underneath the bony prominence on that radial nerve or that radial artery. And so the Dhatu pulse is the middle third, and it's to show the 7 Dhatus. Okay, so when you do this, you want to take your surface pulse first, then you take the deep pulse, then you go back to your surface pulse, then you go to your Subdosha pulse, and then finally to the Dhatu pulse. So it's very important that you do it in these steps. You go top, down, top, middle, and then, well, not middle, but Subdosha, and then finally to that Dhatu. So let's go ahead and pause the video. So take your surface pulse first, then your deep pulse, then take your surface pulse again, and then your subdosha pulse, and then we can go ahead and take our Dhatu's pulse. So go ahead and pause the video and do that. So in the Dhatu pulse level, there's a combination of things that you can feel. Now, the 7 Dhatus represent themselves here. So for example, if you're feeling sensations underneath the Pitta and the Kapha finger combined, the Pitta and the Kapha finger combined, that is showing the Rasa in the Dhatu pulse. Now, if you are just feeling in the Pitta finger, that is showing the Rakta in the Dhatu pulse. If you feel Pitta and Kapha, but like individually, not together as one cohesive unit, that is Mamsa being represented in the Dhatu pulse. If you feel Kapha going into Pitta, kind of like a shooting sensation almost, that's Meta. If you feel Vata and Pitta, that is Asti representing itself in the Dhatu pulse. And then if you feel Vata, Pitta, Kapha, that's Maja. And it's a little bit lighter sensation than the Shukra, because the Shukra is also the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So like I said, in order to get to this Dhatu pulse, you have to take the surface pulse first, then the deep pulse. Then you return back to the surface pulse, then to take the Subdosha pulse, and then finally you're able to take the Dhatu pulse, because you're just going in and out, reading, and innocently taking in the information that you're receiving from your body or your client's body. So when we are able to have all of this knowledge of the 4 different pulse technique readings, we are able to see how our digestive process and the Agni, our digestive fires, really make everything all cohesive together. We can really learn a lot from our body and the signals that it's telling us. So the 7 Dhatus, they get more refined as you go down the list, right? And then finally, the 7 Dhatus, they present out the Upadhatus, which are secondary tissues that are superior byproducts of the Dhatu formation, or the Malas, which are the waste byproducts of the excrements. So for example, Rasa, which is the blood, the Upadhatu would be the blood vessels, and the Mala would be Pitta. For Asti, bone, the Upadhatu would be teeth, and the Mala would be the hair and nails, because that's actually a waste byproduct. If you didn't know, now you know. Meta, which is the fat in our Dhatus, the Upadhatu would be the ligaments, nerves, or joints, and the Mala would be sweat. So when we're able to see what is going on with our body, and what's, if we're having maybe not such lustrous hair, or our nails aren't so great, well, then we probably know that our Asti, our bone, might be a little bit out of balance. We might be able to feel that in the Dhatu's pulse. If the Asti is like acting up, we might be able to feel that. If the nails and everything, we have to look at all of these. So learning to feel the changes in the pulse, along with understanding which part of the body it corresponds with, gives us a much better understanding as an Ayurvedic counselor. And the more we know about the finest details of the body, the more we can learn to bring it into balance and perfect health. All of our systems work together cohesively, and if one is out of sync, the others are going to follow suit. So it's important that we have this really great understanding of how we can pick up on these little signs of the body through our pulse, so that way we can bring our body into perfect health. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and I'm grateful for you, and I'm grateful that you've been here. Bye-bye.